So for those who don't know me, I am Temple Northup. I'm the director of the School of Journalism and Media Studies, and I'm really excited for our panel today. This is day 2 of our career week, something we're trying out this year where we're bringing together some of our alumni and creating opportunities for our students to hear their stories and hear some advice and then ask them all questions. So the panel today is really informal in a lot of ways. We'll just go around the group. I'll ask everybody to just introduce themselves, say a little about what they did, and just how they got to where they are right now. And then I'll ask them about just general advice, and then we'll open it up to anybody to ask questions of them because they're the stars of the show. So let me stop talking because you're not here for me, because you can get me just about any day of the week. And instead, we'll go around our panelists and hear from them. So just to be diplomatic, we'll do it alphabetically by the last name. So we'll start with Faryar if you want to
Sure.
kick things off.
Sure. Thanks, Temple. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Faryar Borhani. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Communications at a company called Encore Capital Group. Those of you who live in San Diego or have been there long enough, you might know the Encore name. We're just right off the 163 and the 8 in the old Union Tribune building. Encore Capital Group is one of the world's largest credit management companies. So we work with thousands of consumers every single day across the UK and US. We have operations in India, Costa Rica, some Latin America. So we're a very global organization, and leading corporate communications there is a really fantastic job. We have a team of about 15 corporate communications leaders all across the globe. So I have a team that lives in all across Europe, actually, Spain, France, UK, Costa Rica, India. So we're a very global and diverse team, which really actually is a big strength of ours. So we lead everything from general corporate communications activities, so executive visibility, branding for the company. We work hand in hand with our public affairs group. So a lot of messaging, a lot of content creation on behalf of the company, which is great. Internal communications is a big priority for us this year, given everything going on with COVID. So a lot there. I graduated in 2010 from San Diego State, so just about 11 years now. And you know, I often talk about my experience there as kind of the catalyst for a lot of what I've been able to do over the last decade. While I was at San Diego State, I was the editor-in-chief of the Daily ASSEC, and I know many of the panelists here, if not maybe all of us, had some sort of experience with the Daily ASSEC. So I know that that's a big deal. It happened at an interesting time. So it was the recession. And, you know, as you can imagine, back then we were actually daily. I know we're not that way anymore. And we were printing 10,000 copies a day. And so $1 million budget for a school newspaper was quite an achievement back then. And we were fully autonomous from the university itself. So we had to raise that every single year through advertising. So imagine doing that when the economy kind of crumbled. It really opened my eyes to more of the business side of communications, let's call it. So I got really interested in advertising, really interested in marketing, building the brand for the newspaper. That was quite important to me. And it just kind of inspired me to go apply to USC's Strategic Public Relations Master's program, where I graduated in 2012. While I was going and getting my master's at USC, I was working full time at a smaller boutique PR agency, which was a great experience. I got to wear a lot of different hats. And then I caught a big break, to be completely honest. I was asked to lead and start a corporate communications team for what was then called Fox Soccer. So if you're a soccer fan and you've been following the sport for some time, it was around for about 20 years before it now became Fox Sports 1. So that was a great experience. I was in-house for about a couple of years and then joined a management consultancy at that time called Pulse Point Group, which really was a true management consultancy for communications, which is pretty unique in our world. So I wasn't doing, you know, PR for companies. I wasn't writing press releases and working with media on behalf of companies, but we were working directly with chief communications officers and chief marketing officers at Fortune 200 companies and above on a variety of discrete needs. So reorganizing thousands of people in their communications teams, working on digital governance, setting up social media command centers. it was a really, really fun time. So I did that for about 8 years, left there as a partner, oversaw all of our integrated communications practices across the firm, across the globe, and was very, very lucky to do that, work with some great companies. So I can talk about that more later. But now I'm at Encore, been there for about 5 months, and it's been a wonderful experience. So happy to be here and excited to learn from all these other panelists as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kemi, I think you're next alphabetically.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Kemi. Right now, I am the press secretary in the U.S. House of Representatives for Congressman Seth Moulton, and he's in Massachusetts. He's in the sixth district, which is like some parts of Boston and some probably other areas that most people don't really know. But before then, I was at Berlin Rosen, which is a PR political communications firm. And I was there for almost 2 years. So the job I have now in Congress is new. It's basically been like almost a month, maybe even less than that. But I graduated from San Diego State in 2019, so almost 2 years ago, and then moved to DC to work as an intern at Berlin Rosen, which is where I just left, and really sort of got my, well, actually, let me back up, because when I moved to San Diego and started at SDSU, it was like right on the heels of the election. So, I mean, it was a ridiculous time, but because I've really been so, I guess, involved in politics for a long time, it was kind of like a natural fit. And I was able to sort of figure out how I could combine, sort of my major, which was PR and political science, and actually like do something more with that. So I ended up, my first internship was at the State Assembly. I was working for Todd Gloria as a communications intern, and that was like my first experience working in political communications. And the really great thing about that internship is he allowed me to be really hands-on. Like I actually got to apply a lot of the skills that I was learning in Dr. Sweetser's class right there. And the great thing is SDSU, their JMS program has a lot of credibility. So they really did give me a lot of autonomy and sort of, writing press releases and, staffing press conferences and sharing my advice and expertise or whatever. And so then after that, I worked for the then mayor of San Diego, who was Kevin Faulconer, and that was over the summer. And that was also an incredible internship because I also had a lot of autonomy, and that was different because I got to write talking points, I got to write speeches, and I got to see how like the day-to-day sort of worked out. And that sort of confirmed to me that like I really did want to work in political communications. But after working for the mayor's office, I was like, I don't really know if I want to work for an elected official. So when I was ready to graduate, there was actually an SDSU alum who she's now the press secretary for the New York State Attorney General, Tish James. But she had went to SDSU, and she had worked at Berlin Rosen. And I was like, this is interesting. She kind of has like a similar path that I want to go into. And so I like connected with her, and she gave me a lot of helpful advice. And then I ended up moving to DC as an intern and starting, and then eventually I started full time and stuff. And I got to work on a lot of really interesting issues. It's mostly a political advocacy firm. So like reproductive justice, healthcare, environmental rights, criminal justice reform. And so as I got to move up a little bit, I sort of got to carve out like my niche. So then I ended up, really realizing that I was very passionate about criminal justice reform, especially like over this past year. Really passionate about electing Democratic state officials, which was a number of different clients that I worked on was electing different Democrats. Specifically this past November, we were working on electing Democratic state AGs. So those are a lot of the attorney generals who like sued the president this past year. So we worked really closely with them and electing them in really red states this past November. And then it's almost 2 years, and I was like, kind of ready for something new. And I'm grateful because of like my experience with the firm and my work there. I was able to really zero in on what I was super passionate about, which was politics and democratic politics specifically. And I always wanted to work on the Hill, actually since I moved to DC, but unfortunately, it's one of those pipeline things sometimes where, you have to know somebody who knows somebody to get in. So through the process, I ended up eventually getting a job here. And I'd say most of my day-to-day so far, right now the House and the Senate are not in session right now, so there's no votes in Congress right now, but we'll be back next week. But I mean, a lot of it is like crafting messaging. Right now, the congressman's priorities are on like high-speed rail, so like, basically connecting like different parts of the country through trains, and also like the economy. So especially after COVID, like making sure people are back in work, and also mental health. So we'll have a lot of interviews throughout the week. And so we'll prep the congressman. We'll make sure that he has all his talking points. This past weekend, he was on MSNBC to respond to Joe Biden's infrastructure plan, and also the Capitol Hill attack this past Friday. So we prepped him that Saturday before the interview, and then he went on the interview. And then of course, a lot of it is like a lot of the other day-to-day stuff that, I'm sure y'all do in class, which is press releases, media advisory, talking to reporters all the time, trying to like make sure they know that, our congressman is the congressman who is leading on X, Y, and Z efforts. So it varies, but I'd say also a lot of what I do depends on what's driving the news. But yeah, that's kind of my rant or ramble, and also really excited to hear from everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Melanie, let's hear from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mel. I currently work as a digital account executive at Allison+Partners. It is a global PR agency. They are based all over. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. They have an office in San Diego, which is kind of where my story starts. But I kind of took a different career projection. I started at SDSU, attended most of Dr. Sweetser's class. Hey, Dr. Sweetser. Had the best time. And after, I'm going to kind of reverse engineer the process, but after I graduated, I landed a dream internship at Edelman, was really excited about it. It was in LA, so I moved to LA. And once I was in the thick of the internship, I took an internship specifically in corporate communications, and I really wanted more of a hybrid role where I'd be able to work on all of the amazing things that I did in school. After about 6 months, I realized, and after my day-to-day, that media relations wasn't for me. And that was kind of where I was meant to start. I mean, that's where a lot of us start when we are first going into public relations. You're thrown into the thick of media relations. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't enjoying my day-to-day work. So, find my dog. So I decided to take a step back. I was working in retail and was trying to find more of a creative avenue. And one of my best friends who also went to SDSU, we graduated together, Cassidy McLean, Dr. Sweetser also knows her. Cassidy is one of my best friends, and she works at Allison+Partners. And I was venting to her one point. I was like, I'm working in retail. It doesn't pay the bills, but I don't know what I want to do with my life. I was having like a crisis of sorts. And she was like, you know what? I know in my heart and soul that you're not done in this industry. So just give it one more go. And she pushed me. And when I say that our network of people in this industry is so strong, I will scream that to the end of time, because it truly is. She pushed me and encouraged me and said, let's try something else. So she set me up on an informational interview with someone at Allison+Partners, circulated my resume, and an opportunity for a digital marketing position came up. And I was a little confused by it. And I was like, well, I mean, social media is my jam. I understand the space, but it was more of an influencer-led role. So I was like, I don't know how I feel about influencers. I had my own personal vendetta. I didn't really know what the space was and what to expect from it. But I decided to take the jump anyway. and it was one of the best jumps I ever did. I now work within Allison+Partners marketing innovation team. So I work specifically on talent and influencer partnerships. I work on social media strategy as well. I really vocalize, and if there's one piece of advice that I can give to everyone is that no matter what job you are at, always, always, always advocate for what you want to do, what those passion areas are and interests. Although I loved influencer, I wanted to expand my skill set. So I screamed it to the shadows that I wanted to do more social work. And so I wanted to really become that point of integration for my clients when it comes to social and influencer work. And then within PR, I mean, we all work in the same or similar dynamics. And that's how my role has grown. Now I'm a digital account executive here. Like I said, oversee a lot of our talent and partnerships with different clients, and my clients vary across the board. So my clients include Impossible Foods, if you've ever eaten the Impossible Burger, one of my biggest clients. Vela Bioscience is a new one. They are a female sexual pleasure serum. So on calls, I will be talking about orgasms with my clients. It's literally all across the board. It's crazy, it's different, but it's the jump that I needed. And I'm really thankful that jump started from the JMS echo chamber, from the JMS community itself. And a lot of what I do, I mean, I was writing social copy when I was going to school at SDSU. I was doing a lot of similar things that I'm doing now, but I was able to take those skill sets and really evolve them and transition them to the role that I am currently at. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about what I do. And like Kemi said, I'm also in this place where I'm like, okay, I've been in this spot where I know influencer, I know talent partnerships now like the back of my hand. I'm able to I know social media. I know it from an SEO perspective. I know it from soup to nuts, really. What do I do now? So really trying to think through what that next challenging step is. And yeah, so I don't know what the future holds, but I am so thankful that where I am now started all because, again, of the JMS community.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mel. Tim, over to you, last but not least.
Well, clearly you saved the oldest for last. And yeah, I was always at the end of the line in my classrooms as well. Melanie, you referenced so greatly how the JMS community has, helped your career along. I graduated in 1991, so I've got a few years on that. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the JMS community. So I guess I'm at 30 years this year. So next month will be 30 years for me if there's ever going to be a 30-year reunion for us Aztec graduates. And I'm actually going to start at the most present because I think it dovetails off of what you just talked about, Melanie, and the Aztec community. Today in my world, I own and run a marketing agency called Southport Marketing, and one of my two business partners was one of my college roommates, going all the way back to San Diego State. And we've worked on and off together over the last 30 years. I just won the NC2A office pool, and he said to me, about time, the first time you win in 30 years, so you must have picked the right team. So, and we primarily focus on experiential marketing, which ties into events all over the country. We have a variety of clients, from Alaska Airlines to a bunch of automotive partners to the Rams and USC up in LA. And we often will dovetail and work with the PR teams or another agency that's working with the same organization. And the crossover from, we'll call it traditional PR, to what we do, experiential marketing, has crossed over in my life for the last 30 years. I have multiple partners that I work with, whether they're a client or they're another vendor of ours, all tied to San Diego State. just endless numbers. The conversation that I think will take place on Friday, I was looking at who's coming up to talk, or on Thursday, one of my former Daily Aztec friends when he was a student, and I was working in media relations in the athletic department. So there's certainly this tight knit group. But when I first came out of school, so I was a broadcast journalism major, and my desire was really to be in sports broadcasting. I was doing PR with the athletic department. My first job out of college was doing PR for the American Junior Golf Association, which is the junior version of the PGA Tour. The easiest way to tell the story was back then, Tiger Woods was 15. And my job was to interview the leader every day and put out a press release, a story essentially out on the AP wire. And when Tiger was playing, Tiger was the guy I was usually interviewing because he won everything, even when he was 15. And then I morphed into a couple different things. And then, as Faryar said, he kind of got a big break. And my big break came when I got an opportunity to work for the San Diego Padres. And I ran all their events and entertainment that they did, and photography. And I was doing a publication prior to that. So I was doing a lot of writing, and that's what got me in the door. And what changed for me was that big break where I started to see that the event side of the marketing world is really what I wanted to do. I had done a bunch of PR stuff. I really liked the event stuff and have stuck with it since I joined the Padres in '95 is when I worked there for 4 years. So I was part of their last World Series run. Hopefully they get one this year if they can stay healthy, as we now know. And then the big change for me was leaving what was really my career at that point in the sports world. I had an opportunity to go work for an agency that was dedicated to General Motors. And it was an interpublic group of companies owned agency that they created in partnership with General Motors called General Motors R Works. Today it's known as Jack Morton. And there we focused and ran all of GM sponsorships, from fairs and festivals to partnerships with the Grammy Awards, all major sport platforms. As you can imagine, GM's really and all their brands are involved in anything and everything. So we touched on a lot of stuff, and I spent 10 years there. And a lot of the work that we would do would dovetail with a PR plan or an advertising plan. And a lot of my time I spent working with a bunch of different regions within General Motors, not just in Detroit or where I was based out in LA, but was about how to better integrate advertising, public relations, digital marketing, how to bring it all together and have a seamless strategy. We were usually the group at the back of the bus because advertising was more important and PR was more important. And then digital advertising shot up and became more important. And my focus was, how do I keep these groups together working on a strategy all in the same plan, as opposed to PR doing something over here and the event world doing something over there. So, the part that I loved most about it was collaborating with the different teams and trying to become more effective. And when I go back and speak to classes at San Diego State, kind of about my career, and the one thing I always touch on is something that we would do with the Grammy Awards. And while we had a great activation and we brought in dealers to enjoy the Grammy Awards, the part that was the best was the PR that we got out of different ideas that we would try and drum up to make more noise, really. And then I left GM in 2008 and started Southport Marketing, and we've been at it through the good times and the bad. Certainly experiential marketing. I've just been on vacation for the last year doing nothing because there haven't been any events to do. Just trying to keep my company staying together. But it's been a great adventure, and the connection. I can't stress this enough. The connection with alumni will last your entire life, Melanie. So that's it's a great thing that you guys learn that at a young age. And anytime I get somebody to reach out to me that could be totally cold and say, hey, I'm at San Diego State, and it's somehow I would love to connect with you, that's a guarantee I'm not going to brush you off, and always willing to have that conversation about career paths and the different directions you can go as you start to evolve in your career.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. The next question for everyone to hit upon, and we'll just go through the same order, is, looking at your careers, whether they're shortish or, distinguished like Tim's.
Thanks.
What are either lessons you've learned or just advice, anything you want to share with students at this point that you think would be really helpful as they are looking towards getting their job. So Faryar, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to kick it off. So I'll pick up where Tim maybe left off a little bit about this idea of connecting a lot of different capabilities and disciplines under the entire communications umbrella. I spent a lot of my time, mostly in my career, consulting with senior communications professionals or CEOs directly. So I've been very, very lucky to have a front row seat to some of that. And often where I see communications work really, really well is when it's not so one-dimensional, meaning you're thinking about kind of the entire suite of things you can offer to a business leader, right? And one thing that I learned early on, and this isn't a concept that I created, it steals from management consulting, but there's this idea of just being a T-shaped kind of professional, right? You want to be across the board really, really strong or have a good understanding of what tools you can pull out of the toolkit. Doesn't mean you have to be an expert on all of them, but you have to know when to kind of spot when to use what. And then you can be really deep on one specific thing, right? You could be a digital expert, you can be a branding expert, you can be a thought leadership expert, but you have to know when to kind of use all these different tools in the kit. And so I've just always found that always put me in a position to get more opportunities, candidly. I think people often don't know what they don't know. Communications is one of those fields that changes so fast. It's really difficult to stay on the cutting edge. And so if you can think about it that way, I think you're doing a better job of just staying in the conversation. I think the other thing, and I hear this a lot from people still, which is kind of surprising, people are like, I got into communications because I'm not good with numbers. I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. I think if you're in it and you're living it right now, you know that our industry at the moment is probably the most measurable it could have ever been, thanks to digital. I think forever, people looked at communications as kind of non-revenue generating. And of course, I'm thinking about it from the corporate lens. Having said that, you absolutely can show how you make impact on the business today. And so one thing I would stress is get very comfortable with numbers, get very comfortable with business acumen. That's so, so important. And what I would also say is, don't think of yourself as exclusively as a communicator. Just think of yourself as a problem solver. I really, really can't stress that enough. I had a mentor who said, if a leader, whether it's at an agency or it's someone on the C-suite at a company, has a problem today, they're going to pick up the phone and that he or she is going to call the 5 smartest people they can think of. You want to be one of those 5 people, right? And that doesn't mean you're just really good at social media, you're really good at working with media. It means you understand the whole environment. And if you can think about it that way and kind of push yourself to kind of be broad in that sense, I think that would serve you really well. Having said that, you still have to have an expertise. And it doesn't mean you have to get it right out of the gate when you graduate, but it's important to maybe think about it in that lens. I have always found that to be kind of a secret recipe, if you will.
Awesome. Thank you. Kemi, what are your thoughts?
That was super helpful. Just some quick advice. I think number one, I think sometimes when we think about communication, we don't always think about how really valuable it is to be able to communicate things very plainly and very simply. And I think that's something that I learned, especially this past election cycle, when you realize you're, communicating to the average American who oftentimes doesn't understand wonky language. They don't often understand maybe language that's used or that academics use. So I think being able to, maybe when you're in an interview, being able to, really stress how, valuable you see that as, and how, and also being able to, stress the fact that you're good at communicating plainly. I think like, at least I know for me that I was like, okay, like what's the synonym for this? How can I use like the most wonkiest language when really that's not helpful? And a lot of times, I know from experience, reporters will really just take your language and they'll put it in an article. And reporters really try to use the most simple, plain English as possible. So I think that's very important. And I think the next one is very abstract, but it was really helpful for me. And I remember my mentor would tell me this all the time is, if you're scared, just do it anyway. I am a California girl through and through. I was born in the Bay Area. Even leaving to San Diego, I was excited, but it was a step for me. And so then moving across the country was terrifying, especially because I didn't have any family. Like I did not really know like what was going to happen, but I knew that I really wanted to work in politics on a more national level. And so it ended up working itself out, which ends up moving me into my third piece of advice, which is, and I think everybody has really touched on this, is staying in touch with your network. There is a huge community of communications professionals wherever you go, and a lot of them, are SDSU alums as well. When I moved to DC, I ended up like connecting with different SDSU alums who in some capacity had worked in politics. And now on Capitol Hill, like there's this like big program where I can see where everybody went to school, and there's like 30 SDSU alums who are like also working in comms. And seeing them as like tools and resources that I can use for like maybe advice, in my current role, or maybe when I want to move on to do something next. I think one of the really great things about comms as well, especially political comms, is everybody kind of knows somebody who you might want to know. So it's something easy as like, hey, I see you're connected with this person. I really wanted to get more information on this organization or this job. Can you connect me? And what I found, because most of I'd say I know I've only really been in my career for about 2 years, but everybody wants to help, or at least most people want to help. And I got to DC and I got in this role by asking people for help, a lot of help. And so far it's paid off, and people are usually super nice. So that's my piece of advice.
Awesome. Over to you, Mel.
I have a few pieces of advice. One, I mean, given my career trajectory, I would definitely say if you find yourself in a position like me where all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what direction to go in because perhaps this isn't what I thought it would be, X, Y, and Z. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with allowing yourself to explore other career paths. I mean, I am still in marketing, which it does work with, we work with PR in a day-to-day. I work at a PR agency. But at the same time, I had a really hard time, seeing other peers and everyone else kind of kickstarting their career, getting to a point, and I saw that for myself. And once I didn't hit that career path, I had some major imposter syndrome of sorts, thinking I wasn't, just not allowing myself to not stick by the books, if that makes sense, and having my own career trajectory. So if that's what it looks like for you, that's okay. Everyone has their own, goes at their own speed. Like Faryar said, I could not relate to this more, but our careers are so focused in numbers because numbers are how we can showcase our work. And I used to say that I hated numbers. And it wasn't until I had to work in numbers almost day to day, pulling analytics here and there, that I got to really appreciate that side of my work, really got to, because when you're starting sometimes as a junior position, like you kind of have to do all that work. And I was like, I hate this. And it wasn't until I started to see how my work was creating an actual impact, how I was moving the needle, how I was meeting my goals and X, Y, and Z, that I was able to really kind of like switch my brain and also see things from an analytical perspective at all times. And also going to what Faryar said, being versatile in your role. It's although in the last year, I mean, a year ago, I had a full plate, but the second COVID hit, I got 10 times busier. I was the busiest I've ever been in my entire life during COVID. Why? Because everyone went digital. Everyone was like, okay, I mean, brands and companies were really had to reset the way they had to communicate with their audiences given the change in the world. And for those on my team, and we're a small but nimble team, we were just being exhausted because people needed us. But we had that mind share. Some of us had PR experience already. We, knew what the social space was looking like. We had to be versatile. We had to be nimble. And in that, it allowed me to get a lot of exposure within my agency because other members of the agency were thinking, okay, I need a recommendation on whether or not this piece of copy is insensitive, X, Y, and Z. Does it meet the criteria whatever that specific messaging is? There are a myriad of reasons and situations, but I was starting to become that one of those people, that point person that people would think, hey, Mel, I have a question. Hey, Mel, can I get your mind share on this? And again, it was because I really challenged myself that my role was going to be as versatile as possible. And then in that, being vocal, always, always, always showcase your work. I can't stress that enough. The reason I've been able to work on the projects that I want to work on, I've been able to really just dictate the work I want to work on here at this agency is because I'm so vocal about what I want to work on. I'm vocal about whenever we kickstart a kick-ass campaign and we reach our goals and surpass them, make a case study, showcase your work, show people how you helped move the needle. And then you can take that work and showcase it, for future job opportunities as well. It really, 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 really helps to not just be vocal with the work that you're doing, but also what you want, what are you seeking? Because at the end of the day, it's your career. And if you're able to map that trajectory out to what you want it to be, it's beyond beneficial. So I would definitely be vocal about having your SDSU on your back. One of the founders of Allison+Partners is Scott Pansky, that I know Dr. Sweetser knows very well, and so does Temple. And Pansky is an SDSU alum, as is Scott Allison, who created Allison+Partners. It was just like, again, this agency was created by SDSU founder or alumni. And here I am, I'm able to, every once in a while, we'll go to Pansky's room and we'll talk about the most random of things when it comes to SDSU. But again, like being vocal about, where I come from, what I want to do, where I'm going, X, Y, and Z. It's don't be afraid to raise your hand up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mel. We'll go over to Tim. If you have a question, you can start thinking about it. Raise your hand if you want, because I'll see you that way, or you can always dump questions in the chat. But first, Tim, your thoughts.
Melanie's not shy. She will just pound right through any door she finds the need to. So congratulations to you. I love the passion. And really, it's, in terms of advice, passion is key. I often will talk to people who are trying to, kickstart what they want to do. And first and foremost, it's just having passion for what it is that you want to do, and having that ability to try new things and to explore, to try and figure it all out. Because look, I went to college with a specific plan. I was going to do sports broadcasting, and that was going to require me to move to a tiny little town in Iowa or Guam. And I said, I can do better than that, and I'm going to go figure it out. And what I figured out along the way was, it wasn't sports broadcasting that I really loved so much. It was the events. And if sports was involved, great. But I go to fairs more than anybody on this call, I can promise you. And I love those too. And just being able to interact with people. The one thing I think that I do love the most is, and would really suggest to start younger or start earlier than maybe I did, is get involved with your community. And find something that, so for me, I'm a member of the Century Club, and it's an organization that runs the Farmers Insurance Open Golf Tournament. I'm a big golfer. I want to give back to San Diego. I blend the two together, and we do just great focus to work with charities here in San Diego that really focus on at-risk youth, first responders in the military. And so, all those things are important. And now I'm able to lend my expertise to that organization to help them as well. And I think the last two things really: don't settle. Continue to strive for trying to find what it is that you really want. I see it a lot of times. People will get caught up in a job that maybe they don't really like, but they're not sure. And then you end up settling. And then before you know it, you're there for 5 or 10 years. Just be aggressive to go figure out what that is. And then you'll get to that place. And then the second half of your professional career, you will love 1,000 times more, since I'm clearly in the second half of my professional career now and still loving everything that I do, which I do cherish that every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank everybody already for this, so much good advice and insights here. Anyone who has a question, you can either unmute yourself, raise your hand, drop it in the chat. What something Tim just said that came out in yesterday's panel that I think is just a really good lesson in terms of getting involved is one of our alums, who's a senior designer for the New Yorker. She got her experience in terms of learning website design and usability by volunteering for some nonprofits that just needed help. And so she had a job, but then she started doing that, and that built actually like her ability to then say, yes, I can do that. And that led through an SDSU connection to the job at New Yorker. So yeah, just look for new ways to try new skills, get involved any way you can. If anybody has a question, yeah, go for it, Mel. Jump in. Anybody can just jump in.
Because it's top of my mind. I just, in terms of expanding like your skill set, one website I really like to use, it's called General Assembly. They have different like locations, actual campuses around the United States in specific locations, but they have different courses. Some courses are free, some are $50. I mean, it ranges across the board, but different workshops. I went to one but right before the pandemic hit, like right down the street. There's one by me in Santa Monica. And did a 3-hour course on SEO, and it was $50, and my agency was able to cover for it, thankfully. But point being is that there are resources. If you're looking for something like that, I would just put that website out there, because I've taken so many courses and with other, and looking at my skill set. But General Assembly is such a good resource if you're looking to, hey, I'm currently going to use it because I want to expand like my skill set in Photoshop and all of Adobe in general. There's a $350 course. It's a 2-day intensive course that my agency is also going to pay for, because I was able to advocate for it and say, hey, I want to do this because of X, Y, and Z. And I would just, again, if you're looking to like those little workshops, not this whole crazy thing where you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me so much money. Like there are resources out there where there are classes you can actually take. So definitely encourage that. If you're looking for a bit of a you know what I mean, another class or whatever that means.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Any other questions out there for our group? And I'll ask one while we're waiting, which is, we've talked, everyone's kind of hit on networking, connecting with current JMS students or previous JMS students. Do you have any specific advice or approaches to trying to make connections online, either with JMS alums or just people that you think would be interesting to connect with? How you've approached networking?
My advice is maybe a bit secondary, but I think in general people are going to accept you reaching out to them, and whether you end up having a conversation or you just exchange some notes. Certainly don't hide the San Diego State fact. The part for me that matters more is you're not just reaching out to somebody because you want something, or obviously you may see that there's a connection and how could that help you, but then don't end it there. Make that connection last for other reasons down the road. And, versus 5 years later, you go back to that same person because there's another reason you need something. Make it beyond just that I need help version to make it more interactive, and trust me, that'll make it last a lot longer. And there's a couple of students that I only met by talking to their class who I still talk to today, 5-6 years later, because they get that part of it and they will reach back out and want to hear what's going on with them and vice versa. So I think that's pretty important.
I think that's great. I mean, the only thing I'd just add to that is, I think Tim's exactly right. I mean, you don't want to, it shouldn't just be self-serving, I guess, right? And I think also when you make the ask or you just reach out, I think be really clear as to why, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you want something out of it, but maybe, you saw not only just San Diego State, but there's a company that maybe you both had in common, or you have other mutual connections, and there's a reason that there's mutual exchange of value, essentially. I think I'd be very, very clear about that, rather than, hey, I just saw you went to San Diego State, can we talk? I think that's probably just the only other add I would make.
I would also add, don't be afraid of also participating in like Facebook groups, for example. I'm part of a women in influencer marketing Facebook group, and it's just a bunch of women in Facebook, like women in marketing, but they all talk about different topics, whether it's, they have a question about how to handle a certain crisis, and believe it or not, people are more than willing to not per se offer like a solution, but like bounce ideas and thoughts, and hey, does anyone represent this kind of talent, so on and so forth. They'll also share different webinar experiences, and just it's a way of just finding niche groups that you're able to even just like sitting in and just seeing how or what's out there. I definitely encourage different groups in that sort of space.
Yeah, I agree with everything they said. And I know most people use sort of LinkedIn as a way to connect with other people, but I also think one thing that's really helpful is connecting with people on Twitter. I know in the past it's been helpful for me specifically when I was still in college and I knew that I wanted to work at Berlin Rosen, and connecting with people who either like were working in similar spaces and who had maybe had SDSU in their bio or something, and I did too, and felt like, sort of marketing yourself in your bio kind of, so maybe they're more inclined to respond, but don't be afraid of sliding in the DMs because it does pay off sometimes.
Awesome. Rose, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about like internships and full-time jobs. So I feel like a lot of people are applying to like internships, and I mean, as we're graduating, we're kind of moving away from like the unpaid internships, but I was just curious if you guys had like a defining marker of like when you move on from an unpaid internship to a part-time to full-time, or if like as you're hiring someone, if there's something that makes you pay them versus hiring them as an unpaid intern.
I can definitely jump in there too. I would, unless you're getting class credit, you should not be taking an unpaid internship whatsoever. Your work and your value is worth something, and so you should never take, unless you're getting, again, class credit for it. But other than that, I was in a situation where I was applying from internship to internship to internship, and I was finding that a lot of the places that I was working at the end like weren't hiring full time, and it was a really frustrating process because that was my goal. I mean, as that's all of our goals. I would definitely make sure that when you're applying to certain internships, like make sure that ask is clear and you're asking specifically, hey, I want to start and I'm looking for a full-time paid internship, whatever that looks like. What does the process look like for a full-time opportunity? Making those asks really clear, because I've also been in instances where I've taken an internship and I've just kind of been strung along, and it's and that's why I also have been mentioning just advocating for yourself and just being very clear on what the expectations are. But never forget that you are coming out of college and you have a lot of expertise already on your back, and that expertise is worth something. And so never take anything less than what you're worth, because you just need to start off on a good foot. So I would just, like I said, definitely make that expectation clear, but I would definitely start off, if you can, looking for a paid internship for a full-time opportunity.
I'm going to emphasize that because I was told very early on not to ever take unpaid internships because, well, I mean, and one thing that I've learned, especially from living in DC, is it shuts a lot of people out, especially if you're lower income, especially if you're a person of color. And it's why so many organizations are so white, because a lot of them only offer unpaid internships. So I totally agree. Do not take those if you can help it. And agree with everything Melanie said about advocating yourself and making it clear. And then, you know, also when you're in the interview process, or when you actually maybe even get yourself in the door, you know, asking, or I guess, you know, asking them about whether they hire, of course, and sort of like, you know, connecting with, I think one thing that helped me as well was connecting with people who are already there, who had maybe done internships before, and asking them about the process that they took to eventually get hired. And like, you know, having coffees with different different people on the team was helpful. And also keeping in mind that, you know, they're going to be lucky to have you. So, you know, you should set your standard. This is, you know, I want to work here, but my expertise, my experiences, my life experiences will be helpful for them, not really the other way around, honestly. And I think Melanie also said, or sorry, no, I think it was Tim who said, don't settle. Do not settle just because you want an internship. Like, you should make sure that you're getting the best internship, the best job that you can at, you know, the position or your situation you're in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rose. Here's another question that I think is sort of related when you're thinking about internships, or you could even think of the first job. You're all in positions now, potentially, where you could even be looking at applications for internships, or, you know, that initial hire. What are one or two qualities or things that, when you're looking either at a resume or a cover letter, that you think are really important, or big mistakes that you want to make sure people don't do when they're applying for any of those types of positions?
No spelling errors.
I'm so happy you said that, Tim. That's right.
How many of you passed the GSP? I think people overthink resumes sometimes, and they want to be too creative. Just give me the facts. I look at resumes all the time. I'm happy to chime in on anybody's resume. And be factual with what you're putting out there. And we were talking about numbers earlier. The more numbers you can put in a resume, the better. Just in terms of, you know, what you want to call it, success or whatever, but separating yourself. The color isn't going to separate yourself. The simplicity on reading it will.
You'd be surprised how many typos there are in cover letters and resumes, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when they know they're sending it to me as an example, and I know I don't have the easiest name in the world, typos, you know, the company name typo, you know, and it's like, I'll just tell you, you know, I've hired many people over the last 11 years, and I honestly believe the special ingredient in like people that succeed exponentially, like quicker over time, are people who have a really high give a crap factor, right? Like, that's like an uneloquent way to say it, but like, do you really care, right? And I think that manifests itself in 1,000 different ways. It's like, are you willing to go get a bunch of different courses at General Assembly? Are you willing to go talk to a bunch of people who are alumni and get more experience? Are you willing to look up more information on a client or a company, blah, blah, blah. But I would tell you the cover letter and resume is your first example or sort of introduction to that. And what I would say is it's not difficult whatsoever to look on a company's website and just see what awards they won recently, or what work they've done recently, clients that they might have, big acquisitions that they've made, and tell a little bit of, I mean, I agree with Tim about simplicity. You can do what I'm saying in a simple way, but I just mean, just tell a little bit of a story about why you think they are a good fit for you and why you're a good fit for them, right? I think often people copy and paste the same cover letter, and trust me, it is obvious. Do not do that, right? Like literally spend 10 minutes and just look up something about the company, and I promise you, you'll be 70% head and shoulders above everyone else who's also applying.
Mel or Kimmy, any advice, any thoughts?
I mean, I can just echo that give a crap factor. No,
I call it something else, but I'm being PC today, Melanie. Sorry.
I think that what definitely has stood out for me in the past is, like you said, just what makes you stand out from other candidates. A lot of the times it's the candidates that go above and beyond, even to reference, like Fire said, perhaps it's an award, perhaps it shows that you're truly invested. And don't get me wrong, I can relate to all the memes that are like, why do you want this job? And you're like, because I need a job. What do you mean? But we know we have to be smarter than that. And it really does make a difference when you see that in applications. Same thing with numbers. I know Dr. Sweetser like nailed that in the head, like at least in my head. And I have always made sure to include that in my resume. And then if I'm able to get a phone call, reference those points as well, so that some of the times when, people are reading resumes for one reason or another, if they miss something, it's always good to reference it when you're speaking on the phone, if you get that opportunity, for example. So yeah, definitely include all those accomplishments and make sure that each resume is for each job opportunity. Like Fire said, people know it's very easy to tell when a resume is copy and pasted, and you're not really understanding the job title. Once I was helping interview a director for an integrated marketing position, and I asked about his favorite integrated campaign, and his question was, what does integrated mean? And I wanted to pass out because I was like, what are we doing here? So understand the prompt, and know that your resume, people are looking at it, make sure that it's simplistic, telling a story at the same time, and that you're marketing yourself in the best possible way.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the way that I don't hire people. I mean, at my last job, I got to oversee the intern program a little bit. But I think the way that I prepare for job interviews is honestly kind of unhealthy, but I think it's definitely, especially for the interview portion, is preparing for every type of question. I usually, when I'm preparing for an interview, I just list out every single question that I think they could possibly ask. And then I'll put little talking points under each, and I'll just like spend time like practicing. I think they hit the nail on the head with the cover letter and the resume, but I know that the interview process is a whole nother level of anxiety. So definitely making sure you're preparing just like small points, and to their point about the numbers, like easy numbers that you can remember and just like throw in to sort of wow them a little bit, I think is really effective also. I missed that in my eyes, so.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We're pushing right up to 1 o'clock. I'll just add on to what you all were saying there, which was some great advice from a few weeks ago, is, if you're applying for a job saying, well, I really love PR, everyone who's applying for the job probably loves PR. Why are you applying to this job, at this organization? And you'll, like everyone said, you'll be surprised at how many people don't do that. And it's just, it's an easy way for people to put your resume and cover letter in the recycle bin and move on to the next person. So I want to thank all of you for taking an hour out of your day. I know how busy all of you are, and so we truly appreciate it. Thanks to the students who came. I really appreciate it. It shows that you take your career seriously and figuring out how you can be successful. So Career Week continues tomorrow. Feel free, you'll get an email about it. But truly, thank you, Kemi, Mel, Faryar, and Tim for joining us today. It shows how you want to stay connected with the school, and that's a good lesson for everybody. And everybody should be connecting with them on LinkedIn and sending a note, thanks for coming today, and start building your own connections. So Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.